Hey,
Hey there. You don't have to be on
sorry.
camera, but just because I went to Zoom, I just said screw it and I turned on the camera. Your timing is excellent. I believe we just went live.
Okay, no camera because I just got out of the shower. If I'd known we were having camera, I'd have been camera
Ah,
ready.
my. Well, yeah, you
All
didn't
right.
you didn't have to get all jazzed up for me. But anyway, my gosh, man, I'm a little bit beside myself because I've had a heck of a time in my personal life since I set up the interview with you, and I hadn't touched base at all, and I was just like. She's pretty busy. I wonder if she remembers because I don't even know if I should ask right now. And then you hit me up today. I was like, oh, okay, she wants to do it, and so I've had to shift my whole self over and put myself into first gear for the show. And I've been
Are
going through
you
the.
are you cool to do it? If you're not cool to do it, we
Oh,
can do it.
I'm super. No, I'm super cool to do it. I'm
Cool. All right.
very excited about this. I hadn't realized until I think after I asked you that you knew Project Cheney because I saw that you interviewed her.
Yes, a couple times I've interviewed her and been on her
Yeah,
secret society and whatnot. But I love Cheney. I don't. I've only known her for about a year, but I have massive love in my heart for that chick. I really
Cheney.
enjoy her.
Yeah, Cheney's the bomb. Cheney's the
Yeah.
bomb. All the super friends are the bomb. But but yeah, no, the and like I said, like I was watching this show with you, right? And so the audience is here. So I'm like just I'm like warming up with you while I'm also having a show. Guys, hi, welcome. I'm
Hi.
Zerilath. This is Trigenesis on TFRlive.com. I'm having a conversation with Strange Mosaics Emily Moyer. And the cool trip when I was watching her thing, it was just like I'm sitting there, just like, oh, that's very interesting the way that she thinks because I think that way, and then like when I told her who I was, she strangely intuited that I was Steve Travesty from Revolution Radio about 10 million years ago when this war was in a very, very different place. And and I was like, "Oh shit. She's an old fan? What?" Oh my gosh, I've died and come back on social media a tremendous amount of times. It's kind of part of my MO. So I'm not even the man that I was whenever you were listening to Roxy Lopez. Dear God, do you remember anything in particular?
So actually, it's first of all, hello to the TFR family. Always a pleasure to be with the audience that Chris and Cherie have carefully curated, and the guests and the hosts that they have chosen. So happy to be with you guys again. And this is actually pretty interesting. I was thinking about this today, what we might talk about, but chatting with you here is actually part of closing some loops for me because I too was a very different person in a very different place at the time that I used to listen to you, and the one thing that is the same. Well, there's lots of things that are the same, but probably the most important thing is my knack for sort of storytelling or framing or whatever, and my almost perfect memory. So I remember exactly where I was sitting and the chair I was sitting in, and the angle of the room I was looking at, and what was going on for me at the time. That I think there was probably a period of 6 months to
Yeah.
a year, maybe a year and a half, where you interviewed her several times, and for some reason, I think my old co-host, who I used to do Off Planet Radio with, Randy Moggins, he had interviewed her. And maybe that was how I found her, or something like that. And so I was kind of interested in listening to her. And then I think I listened to some other of your shows because of that during a pretty strange period of my life. Like I was a drug addicted conspiracy theorist experiencing out of body and out of time uh, occurrences in downtown Los Angeles in the building that the world was being controlled from in the documentary They Live.
Right.
And
Yeah, yeah. But hey, you're a psychonaut.
right, listening to, I don't know if, well, I personally think crystal meth should be considered alongside the psychedelics on some level. It's a very different kind than some of the natural entheogens, but some of the distortion of reality is more psychedelic than some of the other things that people think of as addictive drugs. But I remember sitting there listening to you guys probably multiple times in the apartment that was sort of both an informational heaven and an informational hell for me. But listening to her talk about her experiences in Casa Grande, Arizona, and I had in a previous lifetime to that one lived in Tucson and was very familiar with some of the strange things she was talking about and can sort of anchor them and correlate them to a lot of different issues in my own life, but also just in the way reality is projected. Right. But I never forgot your conversations. I never forgot your voice. And so when you reached out to me, I knew who you were. And it's always, I think this is maybe the third or fourth time that I've gotten to be on a show with someone who I used to listen to in my previous life. Right. So,
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. I was just listening to your show as I was doing my homework. The Beyond the Veil episode that you did for the Astro World thing. So I watched a good chunk of that today, and so it's good to see that like your relationship like with the rave scene, you know, which is much like the Geo's relationship with the rave scene, is similar to when I like am piercing the veil at like my metal shows, right? You know, like one time when I was on with the Geos, you know, I told them like, you know, at the metal show, we love to get that circle pit going. What kind of energy conjuration is that? We're making vortexes. We're creating whirlwinds, right? Tsunamis. And that was how I was perceiving the energies that were over there. And part of what one does if you are an audio wizard, if you will.
yeah, I think that there's probably, I mean, Chris and Cherie and I love to talk about the dance music experiences. I think we have some similarities in like the early days of rave as far as our experiences, but as time progressed, I think the sort of scene that I sought out and the scenes that they engage in are different, and they foster different kinds of experiences, but we love to talk about them. But I would have to say that in the I don't know. I can't speak to electronic music in general, but in the specific subgenres of electronic music that I pursue and that I most enjoy, the biggest crossover to other kinds of music are with metal, different kinds of metal or sort of industrial music. A lot of DJs used to be in metal bands, you know, or some of them still are. Like I'd say, like I particularly like, you know, the specific subgenre of techno and some of the places that it overlaps with house music and whatnot. Other genres of electronic music like drum and bass or, you know, straight house music or whatever may have more overlap with hip hop or R&B or different kinds. But the style of music that I like has tremendous overlap with metal music. And yes, the frequency range and the ability to modulate, oscillate, pitch bend, distort, like, you know, highlight certain sounds, pull them back is all part of a tremendous cymatics experience that's going on at any time you get a dynamic audience in a room with a really good sound system. You're playing with the fabric of space-time for sure.
Have you ever heard Master Boot Record?
I don't, I mean, that doesn't ring a bell, but if I heard it.
Oh, you got to listen to Master Boot Record after that statement. Master Boot Record does basically, I would say basically black metal chiptune. So it's chiptune. It sounds like you're playing Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis 16-bit audio,
Yeah.
but with like all the buzzsaw, like square wave noises and bitchin' pre-programmed drums, like blast beats. Oh my god! And it's butter when you're in the mood for just, just bash me in the head with digital music, right? Just make it sound like a computer is assaulting me directly. That's Master Boot Record. I fucking love it. It's instrumental.
I'll take a listen.
Mostly instrumental.
Yeah, I find like most of the, in previous lives, I have appreciated rock music and pop music and different things like that. And I still sometimes, occasionally, there's a thing. But for the most part, I find that lyrics sort of get in the way of how my system wants to experience a sound or a frequency. When you add vocals to it, then it's kind of like when you're listening to the newscast and you're watching, the building behind you. You see the building, but the woman is telling you it's already fallen, but it's standing behind you, but you somehow believe it's already fallen, right? Like the things that the people are saying, are informing what you see, feel, or hear, right? In a way that if those voices aren't there, you're only relying on your own physiology, your own system, your own way of perceiving the vibrations as to what that sound means or where it takes you.
Yes. And there's an evolution to go by, like you may notice, right? Like I happen to be, among many things, like a fan of Dimmu Borgir. Again, I have a banner of them up here in my den, and that banner, it's got the upside down pentagram on it, right? And in some forms of the music, the Satanism thing is kind of a cover. It's more of a blanket cover for a deep-seated anger against the church for what it did to pagans who were so kind as to let someone who wanted to be a Christian because a pagan didn't care about who you worshipped as long as you understood natural law. That was most largely like it when you look at the sources and some of the best times of the ancient past, right? So instead of invoking particular gods, they just made everything Satan because it's a troll. It's a trolling mechanism, right? And that's often the underlying message with a lot of music that gets into Satan. You have to be, a rational human being to kind of understand that, right? Because, at the end of the day, everybody's pissed at Christians for the abuse of decent people under the guises of bogus witchcraft accusations.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, the metal or the death metal scene or the goth or all of this kind of stuff that, some of society seems to think is of the devil or has ill intents. It did always seem to me to be kind of like what you're saying. Like it always felt like it was much more code for something else,
right?
Or just like people who liked like a lot of dramatics or like a lot of theater and stuff like that around whatever they were doing. I definitely think that the truly dark individuals are generally found in like the Christian music realm or bubblegum pop or something like that, right?
But there are three kinds of Satanists, I think, in my general filter. There's your pretty typical Anton LaVeyan Satanist, which are by and large, they're extremely decent people because, if anybody knows anything about the Satanic Bible, et cetera, they're largely atheists that have, that like a lifestyle of doing the inversion of the church while being people of a decent moral code that is of a liberating sense from the strict dogmatism of the church and how we think we understood what preachers and the Bible are telling us, which nobody does because we don't realize that they were reconstructing the Bible from Greek because Hebrew had been a dead language, and they were making their original transcripts in Greek. And so we're only talking about the original translations into Hebrew, and thus a tremendous amount of bullshit got lost in translation. And then it's just a mere question of how we think about the conclusions we can draw from reading the Greek version, which I'm not going to get into because that's the biggest can of worms, unless you know about Lady Babylon.
Well, I'm not sure exactly to what you're referring, but the Bible, whatever way you see it, is not about what most people who, practice religion think it's about, in my opinion. Right? It's about something very, very different. And you understand sort of what a conundrum and paradox based hologram you've fallen into when you start to try and understand what it's actually about, and whether you're looking at it from a language and symbolic perspective or an elementary perspective or whatnot. The esoteric encoding of the Bible is a completely different thing than what the pastor at any normal church is telling you, right? So that makes sense to me, right? That it's like some of the Satanists are basically atheists who like the pomp and circumstance of the church, but not any of the rules or laws or lies, right?
Yeah, that's an aspect of it. They've got a goth kick. They have a need to explore the dark side. Scorpio is allowed to express himself, like my ascendant. And then the other kind of Satanist is the guy that takes the devil as a real entity, which it is. But sometimes we're also talking about egregores. There's the real devil, and then there's egregores that get called the devil by various extents because of our power to create these various spirits, daemons becoming demons, etc., etc. So you've got them, you've got the occultic Satanists, and then you've got the dark side of the Christian establishment, who are the actual Satanists, the ones that this hypocrisy is all about, and is designed to veil your eyes from the monster acts they do both in their personal life and as manifest on the world stage.
Well, I think we're seeing that, whatever we're living through right now is a shit show of epic proportions, in which it's sometimes really difficult to untangle what is actually going on. And so we're left to look at people and what they say and how they behave, and whether those things are in alignment or whether they're hypocrites. And exactly what you said, right? Some of the hypocrisy we're seeing right now coming from people in power, leaders, Zionists, evangelical Christians, whatever, when it comes to whatever the fuck is going on over there in the place they call the Middle East or whatever it is exactly what you're talking about right there. Like you can see that, you have people who built their entire career on being free speech warriors, demanding the censorship of anybody who says anything critical of, one country or one group of people or whatever it is, right? And I think that hypocrisy, that inversion, if there is anything that is truly satanic or of the devil or whatever it is, it's that, right? I mean,
yeah, precisely, right? One of the so a thing that we got about 6-7 minutes before the break. So we can carry this on because this could be a longer conversation. One of the big thing that hooked us in was you were talking about your Uber conversations. And that was the most, oh my God, I relate to this kind of story I'd ever heard anyone ever say in their life, because you loved trying to wake Uber drivers up. I was an Uber driver. I was the exact opposite side of the spectrum. I was trying to wake the client up. Being so bold as to play fucking InfoWars while driving someone to the airport. That's me.
Nice.
That's me. I'm taking risks. I'm like, this is gonna be a 1-star trip. I don't know, but God told me to do this. Right? So that's what I'm running, and I'm running all of that like right when Trump gets elected. And I'm in the independent. I think maybe Trump will be great. We'll see how it goes, right? I don't trust him, but we'll see how it goes, right? And I was pleasantly surprised for 3 years, mostly 2 years, but yeah. Now here we are in the ashes of what was the ancient civilization we knew as America, and now we don't know what we are. So tell me about your Uber experiences, because I can't wait to pick up on a comparable story. Go.
Well, so I'm not sure exactly to which you're referring, if you listened to me recount one or if just what we said back and forth in our email.
You were on an interview that I caught, and it was part of, like, you were sharing it as an aspect of, like, your history. It was, and you said, like, it was a part of yourself that you were sharing on an interview. I forget which one right off the top of my head. I can look it up while you talk.
Well, so first of all, I'll say that my first experiences with Uber or anything kind of Uber-like was when, during a period of time in my life, I worked for Postmates, which is now like Uber Eats or DoorDash, like however those things came together. Right. I was struggling to hold employment because of said drug addiction. I was out of the downtown apartment, but, I was in a period of time where it was like I knew I had to get out of the way that I was living, but I just couldn't quite make the leap and whatever. So I was trying to do things like gig jobs like that. And so I got approved to work for Postmates. And this was early on in the Postmate days. Right. And I did it for 1 week, and then I never did it again. And the first day, I'm like, this is great. I worked for about 4 hours. I made about $175. I'm like, this will work. This will work for me. This is great. By the end of the week, I saw the progression of the increasingly like not sensible things my phone was telling me to do. And the way sort of, I don't want to say like punishment, but like anxiety was handed down by said application if you somehow didn't do that, right? And so like over the course of a couple of days, I went from, okay, this makes sense and it's pretty easy and I can make money, to why is my phone telling me to go like way far out of the way to pick to go to the Chipotle that's like 10 miles away and then drive 5 miles back to near where I am, where I know there's 3 Chipotles over here, right? Like why? And people are doing that, right? And then I also had this weird thing happen where like the order disappeared, right, from my phone. And then I'm freaking out, not knowing what to do and afraid that if I don't do it, I won't be able to work for it anymore. And I'm like, there's no person on the other side of this. Like, this is my phone telling me what to do, and this is stupid. This doesn't make sense. I'm not doing this anymore. But I see how many people out there are Uber drivers, DoorDash drivers, Postmate drivers, and I'm certain that at some point or frequently, like, one experiences the kind of nonsensical things that I'm talking about, and how many people are choosing to do nonsensical things because their phone is telling them to do it without sort of any questions. And so that was my first concern about Uber and said types of things. When we come back, I'll hear what you have to say about that. And then when we come back, I think I know maybe what Uber conversation, there's a couple of Uber scenarios that I've sort of shared things about recently, but I think I know which one you're talking about, so we can proceed with that. But
yeah, I think you were saying it because I think it was with the first video of yours that I caught, which I think was with where was it, Dolan? Yeah, Dolan. Danny Goler. That's I think the one that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, Danny Goler is an interesting guy. I suggest everybody check him out and be willing to overcome your shock at some of the things that he believes to be true about the world, and just listen to what he's actually saying about DMT, and like you put everything else aside, right? But yeah, I
Break's
think I
coming
was
up right
recounting.
now.
Huh? Okay.
Yeah, break's coming up right now.
All right.
Because
We'll pick
we're
it up.
under 30 seconds. Usually the music starts to kick in.
Find out how things work. Shof gave me this word for my life change. He said, study. If you wish to be successful, study success. If you wish to be happy, study happiness. If you wish to be wealthy, study wealth. Don't leave it to chance. Make it a study. You've got to study the things that can change your economic, social, spiritual, personal life. Now, here's a qualifying phrase. You may not be able to do all you find out, but you should find out all you can do. See, you don't want to wind up at the end of your life and discover that you've lived only 1/10 of it. And the other 9/10 went down the drain. Not for lack of opportunity, for lack of information. So that's number one, find out how things work. Now, here's the best human virtue for finding out, curiosity.
Extendivite is more than just a heart tonic. Do you have any of these symptoms? Night cramps in the hands and feet. Your arms and legs often go to sleep. On short walks, do your legs get aches and pains? Is your memory worse than it used to be? Ankles that swell late in the day? Has your blood pressure increased lately? If you answered yes to even one of these questions, you may have early warning signs of arterial blockages. Your body is saying that it is time to take Extendivite. These are not the normal signs of aging. They are the warning signs that accompany blocked arteries. Get your Extendivite today. Extendivite is available in capsule or liquid form for just $69.95 for a 2-month supply. To get started, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
We exist in the security and comfort of our worlds. Paved paths, lights, and manicured lawns give us peace of mind that our world has been tamed, and we are its master. But other worlds exist on the edge of our sight. On the edge of our awareness, the shadows move. The woods fill with the unblinking eyes of the nightmares our ancestors warned us about. Some of us have stumbled into these forgotten realms, whether on purpose or completely by surprise. I'm Brent Thomas. Join us on the Paranormal Portal Friday and Saturday nights from 10 p.m. to midnight Pacific Standard Time as we journey into the world of the paranormal phenomena.
Okay, I think we're back, folks. All right, guys, I don't know what to tell you. The everything is misaligned, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on, and the geos have not been available. So my apologies. I can't do anything about it. Welcome back to the show. This has been my guest, Emily Moyer, Strange Mosaic. Emily Moyer's on YouTube, and we've been having this grand chat about just kind of just about everything, right? It's just like, effectively, it seems like everything that's in my wheelhouse is in your wheelhouse. We know a lot of the same people going back forever. But right now we're talking about the whole experience doing rideshare or deliveries and things of this nature. And before the break, if I understood you correctly, you said that you were noticing that when you were trying to do deliveries, you were getting screwed over by the routes that you were being given, and it was basically putting too much time and miles into the work, right?
No, not that. Like, I didn't care about that. It was that, like, my phone, right? Because it's coming, all the instructions are coming to you through an app, right? There's like not a person there sort of giving you instructions. And the things that I was being asked or directed by however that algorithm in the app works to do, were increasingly nonsensical. And I could see how this was going to become sort of a social experiment or exercise as to, like, are people willing to follow the instructions that their phone is giving them? And it was during this period of time. Remember, there was like that Uber driver in like Kalamazoo, Michigan or something who like killed a person. And basically he said that like his phone was telling him to do it. Right now, I have a hard time comprehending why somebody would kill somebody or do something like that because their phone said. But if this person had done every single increasingly absurd thing their phone had asked them to do for the previous how many weeks, months, or years they'd been driving for Uber, then at a certain point you're conditioned into taking orders from your phone. I mean, I can't imagine it getting to that level.
Yeah. Well, the Uber app told me to put a
that.
mask on, and I said no a lot.
Right.
And then I got terminated.
Right.
Yeah.
But think about how many people for every one person like you who didn't do what your phone told you to do, hundreds of thousands do exactly what their phones tell them to do.
Right.
And I think that's been part of, coaxing humans into a certain direction.
Right.
That said,
well, I think that in the public square, I think we always had this kind of an integrated like system. There'd be like the town crier back in the day, right? The town crier kind of was like in some cases was was an official like orator of things that had been ordered and written down by the king, right? And he's running through the capital city talking about all the laws that the king decided to change that week. And that those kids are probably also very loyal to that monarchy and to all those, they're kind of like patriots back in the day. And I think that that's what you're seeing. You're seeing these are all the people that are that trust the king, and these apps are the town criers of the king, right? And the king is pleased with us following the orders of the app, and now you know who actually takes someone being the leader of a situation seriously or not.
Yeah,
right?
so I think that's a good analysis. And those days of Uber sort of aligned with what you previously referred to as when we were in a very different stage of this war or whatever it is that we're in, right?
It's a war for me.
Right. And so, after some of those early experiences with Postmates or Uber, I became like very anti that and avoided using those kinds of things for a number of years. And then at some point was sort of forced to use Uber for some reason. And so, was going to like occasionally, use it if I had to. And then eventually it became, like I do it, I use it sometimes, right, for a variety of reasons. And then it's become part of like, part of the synchronicity generating sort of machine or entity for me in my life. And these, I've had a number of interesting Uber rides. I mean, most Uber rides, are on the range from inconsequential to pleasant, right? Like every once in a while you get one that's sort of like unpleasant or irritating. Most of them are not memorable. I've had a few that have been, quite interesting in a variety of ways, but I've had a few that the degree of alignment with whatever is going on for me at that very moment that happens it is beyond what we would normally think of as a coincidence, well into synchronicity and probably like closer to what John Lilly calls a controlled coincidence or something like that, right? And so I think the one that you're referring to was I had been to a party in downtown Los Angeles where I had a definite perforation of sort of the membrane between layers of reality and gleaned a tremendous amount of insight during a pretty dynamic musical and psychedelic experience. And when I left the party, I got in an Uber, and the Uber ride to the party had been very inconsequential. But the Uber ride leaving the party, from how challenging it was for me to get an Uber to how the Uber finally arrived and then what occurred in the ride on the way home, was like beyond strange, right?
Yeah, that was one of the I remember you telling that story, and and there was an incredible synchronicity because this was a guy it happened to be that you could actually kind of talk to this guy. He was kind of
Right.
interested in the pill, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, so what had happened is, to sort of set it up, like towards the end of sort of my peak experience in the party, I had been standing at the back of the room with a friend of mine who I've known for years and years from parties, but who also is sort of in the information landscape here with us. Like, in terms of she doesn't host a podcast like you or I do per se, but she is definitely engaged in this kind of information. And she's also, been deeply enmeshed in the dance music scene for most of her life. But we were standing at the back of the room, kind of reflecting on, some of the things going on in the room and our experience there. And this track came on that had this really interesting robotic voice. And she said, listen to what the track is saying, right? And we had been talking about, like, whatever is running this simulation, like, it's sort of bizarre and fantastic, but it's almost seamless. And then this track came on, and the words were interesting, right? Like, the word, I just was listening, I'm like, wow, it's interesting. It's kind of describing what we had just been talking about. So, okay, I had that experience, and an hour later, maybe, we're leaving. And I'm having a lot of trouble getting an Uber, right? It was like the searching, and it quotes you a price, and then it starts searching for the driver. And sometimes when it's in like surge pricing, it feels like they're trying to get you to stop it and try again so that they can quote you a higher price and a higher price or whatever. Sometimes it's that, and then other times it just feels like if there's a ton of other people right there in that neighborhood also trying to get an Uber, it's having a hard time aligning. So that's probably some of it too, which is always the case when people are starting to leave parties. People tend to leave largely at the same time. So eventually I get one for twice the price of what originally had been quoted when I first was trying to connect. And I'm outside on the curb outside of this party, like basically not on Skid Row in LA, but in something that is the equivalent of Skid Row. And there's hundreds of Ubers in the street and people everywhere. And this car just pulls up and is like, Emily, I'm here to pick you up. Right. And so I get in the car. I'm like, all right, why not? Right. I get in the car and we're driving, and he starts asking me a lot of questions about, like, what is this that you're coming from? He's like, I, quite frequently find myself, is it like a party? Like, I don't understand what these parties are about, but I know I pick up a lot of people from them, right? Can you explain it to me? Right. And so I was explaining to him about the kind of music and why the appeal, and like how it's different than just like, songs that bands sing or whatever it is. And why people like to stay out all night dancing and doing this, right? Basically. And he had mentioned to me a little bit about his background. And so I was able to tap into like his culture and his heritage, and then explain it to him through like the analogy of like fusion cuisine, like, right, like cooking or whatever. And he was like, okay, I get it. Like, I understand now, sort of what you're talking about. And then he proceeds to tell me, a couple of things. One of the things he said is that he is that like there's like fleets of Uber drivers. I don't know why he told me this. It was like intermeshed in between when we were talking about the party and then when he said something else to me later about music. But he was telling me about like that he, you know, like I guess Uber aligns drivers for certain events, and then sometimes those events don't end up happening, and so then he finds himself in a specific area, and that dictates like where some of the rides he picks up. So I guess the party was not too far from like Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles, and sometimes when there's something going on there with the NBA or other events, I guess he's like part of some sort of fleet that is supposed to be around that area. And then if that doesn't happen, then he often finds himself picking up or dropping off people from a lot of the underground dance music things that go on in downtown LA. So it was weird that he just told me that. And he's telling me this as we're kind of leaving downtown LA, or, you know, getting into the valley, which, you know, which is where I was going. But then he starts telling me about how he really liked disco music. And back in the 80s, when he first came here from Mexico, or I think that was where he'd come from, how much he really loved going to the disco and staying there. You know, like he would go every weekend and dance all night. And, you know, he was telling me all about it and whatnot. And then as we're pulling up to my neighborhood, he says, "Can I play you my favorite disco song from that period of time?" And he puts the song on the like he has like a Spotify or something on his digital thing. And the track that he plays is the same track that I had heard before I left the party. That was like basically summing up the sort of experience, right? And like I didn't know that was like a remix or like a lift of a song from a prior time. So I look on his that wherever, like it says what station it's on and what the name of the song is or whatever. And I feel like the name of the song was "Living on Video" by Trans X, right? And so I get home and I'm getting in bed and I'm kind of still in the space from the mushrooms and the music and the party and having kind of weird visions and thoughts. And then I remember, oh yeah, that song. So I went and I go and I look up the lyrics of the song and how closely they aligned to my experience at the party, and my experience the whole evening was like, there is some type of quantum supercomputer or something like that has to have aligned this experience. Like that is just too far beyond coincidence that the driver that picks me up's favorite song from the 80s is the song that I'd heard, not realizing it was some kind of remix right before I started calling for the Uber, and like noted in my head how the song was describing the evening then. And then I looked at the lyrics and it was, you know, it was, the whole song is about like the distortion that happens in our reality because of our relationship with screens, right? I think I can pull up next time we're at the commercial. I'll pull it up and I think it's called "Living on Video" by Trans X. But anyway, that was the experience I think I was sharing.
Yeah,
and I mean, how like that's crazy, right? Because if the first request I sent out for an Uber had gone through, I'm not in his car. Right? So like, how intelligent are these algorithms? Like, do we even completely understand how it is decided which car is sent for which person? I know the driver can accept or deny a ride, right? Sometimes they just continue asking the same ride over and over again, I think, if they do. But
right.
What would you say the likelihood of what I experienced is if we're not living in some kind of strange quantum computer where things are algorithmically lined up?
Right. Well, all of the technology that works and works properly in our world is based on older principles that were discovered, and wise people figured out how to apply it to technology. Binary code, which even a quantum computer, all a quantum computer is saying yes and no. That's all a quantum computer is doing, as opposed to regular computers, which is yes or no. You're 1 or you're 0. Yes or no is because of the ancient Chinese system of the I Ching, the 64 hexagrams, the 64 expressions of change itself. Binary is a quantified expression of the I Ching, or change itself. And whether you say yes to that change or no to it.
Right. And then the quantum computer is saying yes and no. So it's following it's following the path either way. Like it's basically completely living out both options.
Yeah, it's existing in a very Gemini state of duality.
Yep.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. So the lyrics to, if people can just go look up Transx Living on Video, right? But it's basically completely described the experience that I had that night, right? And so it has to have been not only like if you start to pin into all of the factors that had to be something had to have awareness of in order for that alignment to happen, and also for me to notice that it was happening, right? Because I don't know if you listen to dance music or electronic music a lot, but a lot of times when there is some sampling or remixing or lifting of lyrics from other domains and pulling it into that kind of track, like you can't really make out what the voice sounds like or what the lyrics are saying. Sometimes there's a lot of room for imagination and perception, right? There's like even really super famous songs, like My Girlfriend, she thought that the Sir Mix-a-Lot song was saying ooh Rumpelstiltskin instead of ooh rubber smooth skin, right? She thought that for her whole life until I informed her that it was ooh rub her smooth skin, right? And we still joke about that. So even when you're listening to songs where the lyrics are fairly clear and not muddled, right, based on the way they're being used, but imagination and perception and the way you hear things go into all of this.
Right.
So this whole experience could have happened and me not even have noticed how bizarre the alignment was if I wasn't able to recognize that, hey, wait a second, those are the exact same lyrics I had just heard that I had never heard before 20 minutes ago. Yeah. Right. And the song, and it's 30 years apart from when 40 years apart from when the song came out. And when I heard a obscure tech house remix of it, and then this guy says this thing and plays the song, right? So a person, that same thing could have happened. And if someone was just 1 degree less observant or specific in their way that they recall things than me, they wouldn't have even noticed the way that they had just been had their coincidence controlled.
Yeah. I mean, some people. I mean, the thing is that like. A coincidence, and you have coincidences, and then you have synchronicities, and all a synchronicity is a meaningful coincidence.
Correct. Right. Yes, I've done deep research on that. Right. Yeah. Have you ever read the F. David Pete book, Synchronicity?
No, I haven't.
It's a really good book on synchronicities, and for people who are into the layer of the cake that I'm assuming you're into and that I'm into based on how long you've been doing this. Right?
Well, I'm currently reading Heidegger's Being and Time, so I'm pretty thick.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. Right. It is part of the way the universe enfolds and unfolds itself. Right. Synchronicity. And also there are people and technologies that are able to simulate that. And that's what I'm referring to when I call something a controlled coincidence, right? The ones that are not perceptibly different than what would be considered a natural occurring synchronicity or a meaningful coincidence. So then that's at play too. And the way those things interact with each other, and you get these sort of combined or fused experiences of something that is both like simultaneously somewhat controlled, but on another level, like undoubtedly has elements of being organic in it or whatever that create this sort of hybrid perception of reality that we're living in right now, right? Everything is so dependent on the way someone perceives something, which is completely dependent on awareness and imagination, right? And then what your sort of anchor points to reality are, right? So we have this like menagerie, like this vast array, this huge spectrum of like understanding the system that we live in that is dependent on the way a person participates with that sort of that the structure of reality and things being projected from and on it, whether it's coming from you or some external source, right?
Right.
And it's a dizzying array. But I find that very amusing and entertaining. Like, I enjoy that. Like, that experience didn't creep me out at all. I'm like, this is fucking fantastic. Do it some more, right? And people are like, how do you know you're not being tricked and controlled? I'm like, well, if I am being tricked and controlled, let's play with it and figure it out, right? Like, either way, it's like, it's far more entertaining to me than the thought was when it was like, my phone is telling me to do stupid shit. Right.
You know, like you have to have rational judgment, some moniker of wit and wisdom, and then all you're doing is just reading the world that any person who cares about what's going on right in front of them is going to notice and say, you know, has perhaps significance. You know? You know, like the way I handle things, like I see auguries all the time. I'm a pagan, right? I look outside and there's a crow over there, right? When something's happening over there that I notice, and I'm seeing that there's something appropriate about that. And it's just like, you know, a nod from the All-Father to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
That's how I live my life. And it's made it better, 10 times better. And I am more protected from being entrapped by psyops this way. So that's what I have to say to anybody who doubts how you walk your path, madam.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Right. Like, whatever this is to me is like far more interesting than when I used to perceive, you know, like there was a period of time in my life, a long period of time, where it was like just kind of scientific materialism or whatever it is, right? Where things didn't have any deeper meaning than just the actual thing that was happening at that sort of moment. And life was like really like a tough trod. You know what I mean? Like, every day seemed like long and
when you have nowhere to put your heart, you know, like where the hell do you go? Because nothing looks appealing to, you know, how you feel about here till end date. By the way, we got maybe a minute left.
All right. So a minute left till break? Or your show's
yes. A minute left till break. I got you for another hour if you will.
Perfect. I was like, wow, that went fast. If it was just an hour, I was like, that was fast.
I know. I had a feeling it was going to go fast like this. We're both fast minded. It's great. All right, keep rocking over there. Finish your story.
All right, yeah. So I had that experience, and it became part of, you know, what was. If people want to hear the story of what happened that evening, I have a show with Christopher Gardner from like earlier this spring or early in the summer or something, where I recounted all of this with him. If people are interested in me going through like all the details of what happened at the party, and then the Uber ride as well, and whatnot. I think I talked about the Uber ride with him, but it was an integral part of the overall experience that I was having in terms of understanding the way reality and like was encoded, the way our genetics, the way our experiences are largely controlled.
I think the system muted. It just didn't make a noise for the break, but we should be on break.
We're on break.
Yeah, we're on break. So just hold the thought. I suspect that we're back. Sounds like it's been quiet. So let's carry on. It is the top of the hour. It is Zerilath here. on Trigenesis on TFRlive.com. My guest tonight has been Emily Moyer of Strange Mosaic. We have been having an incredible conversation that must be at least 10 years in the making. Seriously. You know, I'm dying to know. You gotta finish your thought. But after you finish your thought, I gotta ask, because you said that having this conversation with me brings closure to a bunch of things. Has that closure happened yet? Because I want to make sure that we have time for your closure,
Okay,
madam.
so
This is interesting.
I'll finish my story first, then we'll talk about what I meant by sort of closing loops or whatever it is.
Closing loops. Let's do it.
Yeah. So that whole experience that I had, and again, like I did a couple of recountings on different shows of mine of the experience, but it basically, like, I had this deep sort of experience of being able to see the way the DNA was written, right? And the ways that sound and light are really used to create not just our experience here, but us on some level, right? Like, we are taught to think that your genetics are this fixed thing. And I had a completely immersive body and visual experience of seeing how genetic code can be rewritten in real time, can be vibrated, right? And how it's this sort of luminous language, right? It was an incredible spectacle to sort of see, right? So I had this experience that was a very immersive sound and visual experience, and then I had this ride home, and also I met some interesting people that night and had some interesting conversations, and then I had this sort of ride home, and this was also the first time I had ever been to a party where they put a black sticker over the camera on my phone, right? And I've been to some other parties since then, but I had been to thousands of parties before that and never had that occurrence before, right? And so in my head, it's largely that there's technology being deployed, right? It's a deep underground sort of scene that I'm talking about, with sound and light and different things going on.
Right.
But that
Are we talking about the rave scene again?
This is. I mean, it's the extension of that I sort of moved into post those years. So it's like the deep underground Los Angeles techno and house music scene.
You were touching upon that with the geos while I was waiting for the show to start. Yeah,
highly based upon, like, it's not just about, like, you know, what DJs or what style of music. This is really getting into like military grade sound and lighting technologies that, you know, are still experimental in nature, right?
Yeah.
And what it felt like to me by the end of the whole experience, right, was kind of like the Uber ride home was two things. Like, there was an investment on some level of making sure I got home safely, right? Because I had the full experience of that you could have at the party. Like, lots of people were there. Most of them probably didn't notice what I noticed, even though many of them may have had a good time or had some other sort of version or experience of it. But I saw a technology, like this sort of interactive, participatory sound and light technology for what it was. And like, it was quite enlightening, but I was able to wrap my head around it and report, like, I'm sure that there's probably people that like to listen to me describe it and be like, oh yeah, that's what we're going for. Yeah, no, not what we're, you know, that wasn't exactly it, or whatever it is, right? But that it felt like the alignment of the Uber driver was both partly about, like, me getting home safely. I took an Uber to the party that night, which is something I've rarely done in Los Angeles, take Ubers to parties, because the parties are pretty far from where I live. But for some reason that night it felt important to. I don't know why, right? Like, maybe the sort of rattling of the water in my body, the cymatics or whatever, it might have been challenging to like get in a car and drive home afterwards. So something inside of me, I don't know why I did that, but so there was that. But also the experience with the driver felt like closure on that experience based on what the lyrics to that track were, and the overall experience of the night was kind of a confirmation of what I had just experienced, and that you really can completely change a person's perception of reality through the digital sound and light media, right? To me, there's like lots of people who like want me to be worried about that or scared of that. And I've been around for a long time, and I've learned to be cautious and measured and whatnot. But whatever I experienced was like a really interesting use of technology that required a person with a high level of imagination, awareness, and whatnot in order to sort of participate with it or appreciate it. And I love technology like that. Like, I think that's fascinating. And, I guess I'm past is this good or bad or, benevolent or malevolent?
Right. Well,
is it interesting?
It's technomancy. It's technomancy. And, it depends on if the infrastructure and the intention of the user are within divine accord. Right. And you have to know what divine accord is to discern that, like where your knowledge of right and wrong is coming out of, including is the math for how this thing works,
correct,
configurable to math that is of a benefit to the subject of the technology, i.e. the person dancing there. Right. Like, when I want music specifically for practically a medicinal effect, I'm going to put on my pagan folk meditative music. It's going to be Hai Lung in particular, right? And that is dance music using drum skins. No computers involved other than in the production process on the other end.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, to what you're saying, the flyer for this party, if you're a person who can read between the lines, which I like to fancy myself able to do that, it was pretty clear what you were agreeing to by going to this party. I was able to post-party identify everything that happened in the flyer of the party, right? And it felt like a seamless, enlightening, pleasurable experience to me. The headlining DJ's name was Pleasurecraft, and it literally was kind of like having gone on a day cruise on some kind of weird interdimensional sound and light craft, right? Like, and I'm sure there was lots of other people there just like having a good time at the party, chatting with their friends, mostly smoking.
But the reality of these particular kinds of events, it's Pinocchio, man. It's the Pleasure Island. I think it was called Pleasure Island in Pinocchio. And then by the end of it, the witchcraft had done its work and all Pinocchio's friends had turned into jackasses.
All my friends are already no, I'm just kidding. I have great friends. But so to me, like, now I've been to thousands of parties. And, in that thousands of parties I've been to, there's a handful of ones that are really special. And there was a lot of parties that were a lot of fun. And there's some parties that were average and some parties that were boring and some parties where I was in there and I'm like, this is a terrible energy that I don't want to be anywhere near. And my spirit does not feel comfortable or safe staying here. So I'm leaving. Right. Those are,
your empath kicks in and it's just like, my good vibes don't have a place here. I'm moving on because today's not conflict day.
Right. And correct. And sometimes you end up at a party that's like kind of weird. Like some people might think it was somehow dark and disturbing, but it felt like, okay, like I can be here and observe this for whatever it is and report on this experience, even if only to myself, or think about it. Like I like the diversity of experience, like a variety of kinds of things, but I also am good at listening to my little inner knower when it's like, yeah, you should get the fuck out of here, right? Like this is, or whatever it is, right? And like to me, this felt like I got to experience something, and it felt just pretty neutral to me, like in terms of whatever its intent was. It was just sound and light doing a thing, and the experience was there and available for those who sort of noticed it or wanted to participate in it or whatever. And for everyone else, it was just a fun party with really good sound and lights, right? Those are some of my favorite experiences where you can engage on whatever level you want to.
Yeah, right? Yeah. People, like we, because of the way our awareness works, our wisdoms work, we have protections that are they're very easy protections where you can get into situations and not be, tricked into the bondage involved with that situation, right? It's just a question of whether you're interested in stirring the cart and thus screwing with the agenda. They just don't want you screwing with the agenda at that point. Otherwise, you go ahead and be free, knowing that you're playing around with slaves, right? That's where the war exists.
There's been times when I've been at parties and I have realized that I noticed something that maybe either I wasn't supposed to notice, or I noticed it and I said something to someone about it that literally brought the party to an end immediately, because it was like, oops, the jig is up, right?
Oh my
had
God.
that experience too.
Oh my God. I've spoiled a thing or two once in a while. Oh, right. Have I been a spoiler? And it's in my life, it's just like I'm Uranus in my ascendant in Scorpio. I hit your shadow and I poke your shadow. I'm that annoying guy that sees what's going on in your shadow and can poke it. So I had to learn how to keep that under control, because I don't need that many enemies today.
Yeah,
I'm trying to help most of these people.
And also, there's always the voice in my head that's saying you're getting a little carried away with yourself there, little girl, right? Like sometimes,
right.
Sometimes we over assume our importance.
Yeah, because we've got this divine gift. We got this divine gift, and then your little narcissist can kind of kick in. You want to be a superhero, right? I want to be a superhero. A lot of people want to be superheroes, right? I was hearing you in the other interview saying like, the guy was saying like X-Men is not that far-fetched, right? And you mentioned playing with the genetic code, and I wanted to bring up, I've lived by the acknowledgement of epigenetics, right? Yep. I mean, I don't know if you know what I looked like 10 years ago when you first heard me. But I was 224 pounds, 38-inch waistline. I was a completely, they say you're not doing it right if you don't look back at yourself and feel cringy about it, right? So, yeah, there's a cringe. And I went and I kicked my own ass, and just looking at everything on the inside of me that changed and everything on the invisible side of me that changed was a scary, surrealistic experience of sitting next to oneself and seeing 10 years ago as a completely alien you, right? And that's been my my life over the last 2 years, right? And so definitely there's been a genetic change. I do Qigong, I do yoga, I work out, as well as my playing of guitar and living my life the way that I do, doing rituals, so on and so forth. And all this stuff has a deep internal effect on my abilities, and I could tell it's doing stuff to my DNA.
The way we move, the sounds we spend time listening to, and the things we look at, right, have a very deep impact on what we become. Right. And, there's a variety of different ways to understand epigenetics that's been presented, from like the way Bruce Lipton talks about it to lots of other people. But like what I literally was shown is that we can vibrate our DNA, right, into different sort of combinations and patterns, right? And that is, like largely what the sort of more esoteric study of genetic engineering is about, like, right, not the scientific, whatever master race kind of thing that people think of, right? Like there's that too, but that like literally you're able to sort of sing a different song and find yourself in a different play, right? Or move a specific way. Like, people really they know this somewhere inside of themselves, but they often forget, like, movement and dancing, right, is really, really important. And in the shapes we make with our body, right, the patterns that we sort of move in or whatnot, are, some of them are sort of like sacred and ancient for a real reason. And it's almost like a portal or a pathway for a connection, over time and different places and whatever it is. You can look at like a lot of indigenous cultures from different places around the world, and a lot of them have very similar movements, even if they're done in different kinds of costumes or to music that like has some different elements. So at first you wouldn't recognize it as similar or whatnot. So yeah, it was really interesting to look at it. And at that time, some of the other things I was looking into with information, it sort of correlated to them and then led me on a path that I'm, kind of down now, where I'm very, very focused on what we are made of, both the environment around us and our, bodies and whatnot. I'm focused a lot on genetics and nuclear fusion and the esoteric reading of the periodic table and whatnot. And much of that stemmed from my experience that evening.
Right. Yeah, you must be getting pretty dived into traditional alchemy at this point. I noticed that you were on the one-on-one podcast. I think maybe twice I saw, at least. So you're looking at alchemy, and that makes a whole lot of sense. Like I have snorted liquid gold for the sake of, for the sake of my genetic superiority. Like these are part of my journeys. I can't recommend enough for people on the most basic level. You want a basic qigong thing? Look up what yin yang hands are. Emily can see it because I'm showing her my screen. Just right hand over the heart, left hand under the navel. And you hold that there, and that gives you a sense of your held energy and your projected energy. That's what yin and yang are, right? Yin is the ability to hold energy, and yang is the ability to move energy. And you work with this particular posture, and you work on balancing your internal duality. This gives you balance in the external world, balance in the way your mind functions.
Yep. I mean, and you're that you can do some of this with just holding static or very gently moving sort of poses and whatnot. And then there's increasingly intricate or sort of, layered. You can do a lot of stuff with movement that's similar to what you do with music in terms of layering beats and drum patterns and different things like that, right? And you start to, put something together that is, like interesting when you pull it apart and look at all the elements, but once you put them all together, create something that you would never imagine have been made from those disparate pieces, right?
Oh yeah.
So
for me, it was so much fun when I had done either a yoga flow or a qigong ritual, if you will, particular session, so many times that I was just like, you know what? I think I'm going to move my hands this way now. and adapt and change it and evolve it, right? Because there was something that was feeling like, I don't think you need to work on this particular energy module anymore. There's other forms that this needs to flow with, right? And then this is me regulating my energy, and I do this nightly. This has been like every day of my life for like 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ritual.
Well, good for you for recognizing that you needed to make a change in the, sort of direction your physiology was moving in and making that change, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was a visceral reaction to the way the world changed, right? It is not a overdramatic statement for me to say that like I had that internal death. I died in the pandemic, right? It killed me, and war was declared. So I was just like, people are at war with me. So, you've ruined the future that I thought I saw that I had, and it was you, my fucking neighbor. Fine, you want me to be scared? And I mean my neighbor, just not like my neighbors didn't do anything wrong with me, but I'm just saying, like, it was the participation, it was what the unconscious masses were doing that you were not allowed to not participate with unless you had your own private arrangements for essential necessities or anything else that you wanted to do. It was very hard for some people where I lived to find a maskless world, That
you live on the East Coast? You live on the East Coast, yes?
What's that?
You live on the East Coast?
Northeast, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very close to New York City. I saw whatever it was, the big ship they pulled in with the big red cross on it.
Yep.
For New York. It was surreal. I dropped off somebody in Times Square. I drove through Times Square. It was the first time in maybe since, the Spanish flu that Times Square was empty. Times Square was empty. What do
you think the big ship was really about? Because we know that it was never actually used for the thing that they told us it was about. Having seen it yourself, what do you think that was about?
Well, it obviously was a symbol. I think it was all psychological, because it seemed like there wasn't anything preventing observation inside the ship. I saw lots of footage from inside the ship. I don't think there was anything off limits, like as far as the public areas are concerned. It's really hard to say, but if no more information has come forward from people that have gone through anything with that ship, the one thing that I do know is, at least in New York, is that because the projection of what people were going to need if they got COVID was wrong, the ship was not used. Like, what you never saw was anybody getting into those ships other than like one or two people. Those ships were put aside for people that needed the hospital, because the hospitals were taking the COVID patients. The ships were designed not for COVID patients. Those were for people that needed general surgery and shit like that. Nobody was showing up to the ship to get the shit that the hospital wasn't going to do for them. So the hospitals were being the monsters. The ships were there because the hospitals were closed for their imaginary play, so they could film their TikTok videos and psychologically traumatize you with clowns.
Are we like, because this is not a thread that I like really pursued or thought about much at the time.
Yeah.
Are there any reports of people getting normal medical procedures on these ships? Did anyone be like, I went for my cancer treatment on the ship?
Pretty much, there was almost none. It was very few. It was so that there was like nothing to do. There was almost nobody in these hospitals except for a handful of people with respiratory issues in the ERs, and there was practically nobody in the ships either.
So when we hear all these, like, right, you hear these reports, which, like, so many things that when I say we, I don't necessarily mean you and I, but the culture at large believe about reality are based on quote unquote reports, right? And then if you actually try to find someone that you can actually physically know or meet in real life, it's almost impossible to find anyone with this
Yeah.
experience. So all of these reports of people dying of cancer or this, that, or the other thing because their services were suspended during COVID or whatever, right? That brings us to the same point with that as we get to with, did you know anyone who died of COVID, or have you
Right.
ever met anybody who was actually kidnapped, or
Yeah, I'm
did
picking
you
up
really ever know?
as an Uber driver. I'm picking up all these nurses like going to and from hospitals, and I'm asking them from time to time, talking Uber stories. Right? Hold on. Oh, we're about to hit a break. This is gonna have
All
to
right.
wait for the next one.
Yep.
Get in there. The world might say you are not allowed to yet. I waited a long time out in the world before I gave myself permission to fail. Please, don't even bother asking. Don't bother telling the world you are ready. Show it. Do it. Raise the rest of your life to meet you. Don't search for defining moments because they will never come. The moments that define you have already happened, and they will already happen again.
The reviews for Extendivite are amazing. Here are some from Amazon. By Christine, great for heart palpitations. By Anne, before I started using this product, every afternoon my ankles and my hands would be swollen. That doesn't happen anymore. So if that part of their advertising is true, I have to assume that the rest of it is also. Not to mention that when I had my yearly blood test, only a few weeks after beginning to use this product, my cholesterol had dropped over 30 points. I'm going to continue to take it. By Croc, I love this product. It really works. By Brad, works great, thank you. Tell us your story. Get your Extendivite today. To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
Travis Cook, America's Evil Genius, here to invite you to join us every Tuesday afternoon here on Truth Frequency Radio. No, on our show, you will not see a bunch of three-piece suits or a cocktail party, and you certainly won't see a bunch of inside the beltway band. But you will see eye-gouging, crotch-kicking, no-holds-barred political discussion, the likes of which you won't see anywhere else in media. America's Evil Genius. We come to you every Tuesday from the outskirts of war-torn St. Louis, Missouri, where there's always a good race rider sex scandal just around the corner. Join us every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, and noon on the left coast right here on TFRLive.com. America's Evil Genius, Travis Cook, on TruthFrequencyRadio.com.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are your protection from deception.
Okay, I suspect that we're back.
All right.
Is my are my
follow that suspicion.
Just making sure. Okay. All right, so
Okay.
we're good. So I was talking just before the break, and it was in response. I was telling what was it? I was telling my Uber story from the COVID era. Yeah. That's what it was. I was telling my Uber story from the COVID era because we were talking about the hospitals being empty and the hospital ship in New York also being empty, and reminding people that the mission of the hospital ship was to take the people that the hospital was turning away for regular surgery and things of this matter. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and we were just talking about like, we were hearing all these reports of people not being able to get medical services because the hospitals were taken over for COVID treatment, right? But then you're also saying that the ship was basically empty. So it becomes one of these things where it's like, were there all these people dying because they couldn't get medical services? Or like, is the entire sort of like the reality that the relationship that the public has developed with quote unquote the hospital, one of these like completely sort of created realities that we engage in, that like, there isn't this high level need for the hospital that everyone's been led to believe that there is. But as long as you believe there is, there's ways to find to engage it, right? Like if the hospital ship was there to treat people, why were we having reports that you couldn't get hospital services other than if you had COVID? Right. And I didn't know that that's what the hospital ship was for. I thought they were
I think at the end of the day, there was such an emphasis in the signal of staying home, and that there were staying home options. I mean, why are you going to go to this ominous, like, this thing is like one of it's basically like a giant, like super tanker, right? The kind of thing that hauls like goods from like China to like LA, right? Like that's what this thing is in its size and shape. It's a giant hull on the inside, right? You could have like 3 football games going on in there kind of situation, right? And so it's kind of like a giant white obelisk.
Yeah.
This is like, that's terrifying, right? It's run by the government.
Right.
And then you're talking about liberal New York, and you're going to go to a ship that's under Donald Trump's orders and Orange Man. I can see exactly why people would be more interested in staying home, because, oh my God, the zombies are here and the doofus is in charge. Hillary could have saved us. Right. This is what these fucks are thinking at this particular moment in time. That's what's going on in their fucking heads. That was a big part of the mind control. That the doofus is in charge. I was a little shocked that things got better when Donald Trump left, to the point where I just don't want him back. I love Cheney because I love seeing Trump the way that she sees Trump, even though I don't think that's right. Because we both want the same world. I just think that Trump is not the avenue for it.
Cheney is interesting because like she's very sort of patriotic and believes in voting and all that kind of stuff, and like it doesn't bother. That's like she's a great person to chat about that stuff because if her stated opinion is her real opinion, we're at total disagreements and odds, but we're able to have like a forward-thinking, interesting conversation anyway, and like that's fine with me. I
think she's very confident that she can get through to the right people to get through this whole thing and make people better, right? And I think that's what she's trying to do. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to get all the metalheads on board. Like, yo, you headbanging motherfuckers over here. Come here, man. You guys be awesome in this army. We're going to win. It's going to be fucking great. Right. That's like my attitude.
Yeah.
Right. And, and, if we don't have people that we care about in this world, then it's just like, you're not going to be fucking invested in trying to save it. Right? And 2020, was a harsh lesson in stop being so altruistic, you empathic fuck. Right? That's what the world was telling. The world was telling me, stop trying to help me. I want to destroy myself. I want to mutate into an abysmal thing that you will pity for the rest of my life. And I can complain about that. And so the government gives me money that it steals from you. And that's when I lost faith in mankind. And I said, I only care about people on a very fucking personal basis.
Right.
So personal that I barely fucking have that connection digitally. And I've been betrayed too much and too recently to have that level of connection on the internet. Right? So the
Right.
real world and that majority of normies that I have to go fucking interface with at work
Right.
and everywhere else, that's what I got. Can I be Superman amongst the mortals and bust out and fucking save the day with my kung fu magic? Right? Is that gonna happen? You know, and I gotta save these guys instead of all the fucking metalheads, you know, or something like that, you know, because the metalheads they can be, many of them are on frequency because they love the bands that are about that stuff. On this show, well, no, when I was still on Revolution Radio, excuse me, I got Henrik Olsen, the drummer of Scar Symmetry, Swedish technical death metal band, very melodic, and the drummer is the writer. He writes all the lyrics, and he's got albums called like Holographic Universe, Neo Humanity, about transhumanism. It's brilliant shit, and he's awesome. He's tuned in. There's a band called The Harp Machine. They were like kind of like a one album wonder. They were amazing. They were named after The Harp Machine, and they had a song called Pleiadian Keys. Like, these guys were super tuned in, tight, and on high profile heavy metal labels. I was so glad they were out there doing their thing. The band Hypocrisy with End of Disclosure. Like, there's a million bands that are like theme songs to the revolution that goes on in my fucking head.
Yeah, no, I have the same thing with like a lot of techno artists or whatever. Some of my favorite techno producers and DJs over the years also came from Sweden and would have sort of techno albums that were about very similar things that I was interested in or that we talk about on shows or whatnot. Sometimes it's a bit confusing because their public facing persona goes along with the charade, right? But the symbology and the ideas that they implant in their music speaks to like a different level of awareness. But yeah, it's sometimes interesting to try and untangle those contradictions. But yes, I appreciate the same thing about lots of the music I like too, that they're obviously playing with some of the same themes and ideas. I wanted to circle back to what you asked me about the closing loops, right?
We don't circle back around here. This ain't no Biden administration.
Right. Is that Jen Psaki circling back? So,
no.
I don't know if it's so much about closure as when I say closing loops.
Yes.
Is that, that was, so I've had on my shows or done shows, like I've had many guests on my show that were people that I listened to be interviewed on podcasts from sometimes as far back as when I first woke up in the early 2000s, right? But there's only a couple of people whose podcasts I listened to back in the day that now I've gotten a chance to be a guest on their podcast. I've spoken to a lot of the guests, but not too many of the podcast hosts. I think it's like Randy Moggins, who that was my favorite podcast, period. And then I ended up co-host and producer of that podcast later. I used to listen to Chris and Cherie back in that apartment. And then I ended up, being friendly with them and being on their show and them on my show many times. And now I'm on with you. And it's really interesting for me when I get to go on someone's show who I listened to during that period of time where I was going through some kind of separation from reality as I knew it and initiation into, in like the most sort of deep and direct way, into the awareness that this place is really not what we were told when we were kids in any way, that there's many realities within those realities. There's many pockets that, are accessible to some people and not to others, that, that time is not as fixed as we think it is, that space is not where we think it is, and all of this kind of stuff. And I was sort of obsessively and relentlessly listening to information and engaging in behaviors that were like objectively on some level ruining my life, right? Like my friends thought I was crazy. My family thought I was nuts. I was going deeper and deeper into drug addiction, partly for like, it was like a dual use kind of thing, right? Like I was struggling with this awareness that I had, right? That the world wasn't, what we were told it was, even though from the time I was a kid, I always had some suspicions that like what we thought was going on and what was really going on was not the same thing. But I had that full separation. And then also the drugs sometimes were like anesthetizing me and like allowing me to be somewhat numb to be able to do some of the research and listen to some of the things that we have looked at and listened to over the years that are highly disturbing and would break most normal people, right? The drugs sort of, and I'm not saying people should do this, but allowed me a path through that allowed me to look without being touched in a way that would have broken me. And most people who are drug addicts are not sitting in their apartment doing research, trying to figure out what's going on. They're generally either out partying or, if you're looking at some of the people that, end up on Skid Row in the streets, they're aware that there's this other reality. They just can't compartmentalize themselves in a way that allows them to maintain normal function. And somehow I was lucky enough to be able to sort of do that. And I used that time, as unhealthy as some of my behaviors were, to figure out a lot of this stuff that has become the content of what we all talk about here and right. And whenever I get to, like, you were on the other side and Randy and the people who I listened to were sort of very far away from me where I was then, and I was listening, but there was things being talked about that I knew was true and was important. And like, eventually I was able to kind of come full circle and find myself in a way that I could make those connections and talk about them with people, not just you guys, but even make people who don't care about the things that we care about sort of understand what I'm talking about, even if they choose to believe that that's just the sort of stuff of conspiracy, when it's well explained to them and then they have an experience where they cannot deny that it resonates with something that I told them about, they suddenly take me more seriously as a person. And when I was listening in the apartment of simultaneous sort of heaven and hell to, people have conversations that I really wanted to be having in my real life, I felt like I would never get there. So every time I get to chat with somebody who I listened to in that sort of highly separated and in some ways much degraded state from where I am now, when I get to talk to someone that seemed so far away then, it's kind of a lot of validation and confirmation about the path that I've been on. And specifically, like some of the things that you and Roxy were talking about, right, were related to experiences that had happened in my life many years previous and that I didn't completely understand the significance of until much later. And I can go and dial back now onto some of those conversations. And I know things about, she was living in Casa Grande, researching, Evergreen and their relationship to, geoengineering and some of the other strange things going on the ground. And there's lots of layers to that have to do with what she was talking about. And then maybe some things that she wasn't aware of. And it was, I never forget those stories that people tell that help me to make sense of an experience I've had, even if they don't know about that.
See,
and those
like,
are
right. And what you would know about me that a lot of people don't know because just the way censorship interrupted the continuity of history, yes. I've lost YouTube channels. I personally deleted YouTube channels for very particular reasons and all these different things. Archives are lost and everything else. So there isn't a hell of a lot of history of my time from 2012 to I'd say like things get really hairy around 2017, 2018. It starts breaking up at that point, and then it gets better at that point forward. I was better with records and everything else. But the long story short is that like I landed on Revolution Radio based on nothing more than participating in those roundtables because I followed Sean David Morton from Strange Universe. He was the guy in the scene at that time that I was all about, because in 2012 there weren't a tremendous amount of people that really knew something to say something, and it was and what it was, right? Everything that is what Sean is of himself. And I always, I love him, man. He's a good man. And then I was like, oh, I can call in. It's like, I'm dying to have these conversations. I'm worried about the country, yada, yada, yada. Right. And so I'm sitting here with these older guys, and the questions I'm asking, the things I'm bringing up, and the bridging of concepts that I am establishing was extraordinarily trailblazing to what would become the norm with people that would subsequently wake up later. So all of these trends were very much paved by Revolution Radio, TFR Live, even some of these other stations to different extents, American Freedom Radio, so on and so forth. And it was just a question of breaking through with constructive questions, more constructive questions, where you're working to, it was like you're hunting down and trying to nail the target. Who's the perpetrator of the crime? How do we get viable charges on them, apprehend them, bring them to justice, right? And this was a mindset at Revolution Radio. That's kind of what the revolution was. We're sitting there like, okay, what is it with the Jewish conspiracy? I don't want to be anti-Semitic, but I can't effing ignore it anytime I look at where the money goes, right? So you have to deal with that, and the backdrop of bringing that up makes you anti-Semitic. And before the Trump era, people didn't understand that they will just, call you anti-Semitic as a slanderous attack on that level, right? Nobody understood that that's what it was like, because nobody stood up to the beast and saw how far the beast was willing to go to defend itself. That's what changed the game dramatically for conspiracy theorists, and also liberated a lot of people that were sick and tired of being called Nazis, because, their race can be picked on for something that may be kind of objectively true by the elites, and say, well, what about the elites of your race? Because we're really just talking about everybody's elites. The Jews have elites, the whites have elites, the browns have elites. Everybody's got elites.
Right. Yeah. And the misdeeds or bad behaviors or strange personality quirks of each group's elites, unfortunately, are used to create this blanket, of perception about the people in general. Right. Yeah. I mean, and also there was, at least as far as I recall it, I found, Sean Gautreaux. I don't know if you remember him. I think
I interviewed Sean Gautreaux a number of times. We used to be friends. What is in our skies? Oh my God. Oh my God. Looking at the clouds, man, I can see when there's a fleet, when there isn't a fleet. Oh my God, I can see him. It's fucking great.
I feel like there was some interesting shows. I listened to some of your shows with Roxy, some with him. I think they had some conversations together. And it really gave me a much more nuanced and intricate perception on what was going on in the skies and how it correlated to things going on the ground. And at that time in particular, there was a very specific version or narrative of chemtrails and things like that they really wanted everyone to subscribe to.
Right.
And you would see people unwilling to consider anything that went off that narrative.
Yeah.
Right. Particularly when it came to real life consequences for people who sort of interacted with some of these many faceted sort of technologies or whatever phenomena or whatnot, right? There was kind of like one main narrative and then like a sort of a sub-alternative narrative that was also acceptable. And then for me, I was into the like way off the plantation, more batshit kind of stuff. But in my opinion, like that's actually really where it's at, right? Like some of the phenomenon that we are witnessing, experiencing, and interacting with are very strange. And when you begin to understand them, it becomes very clear that we don't understand much of anything about the nature of our reality, right? And it's really easy to keep people in line, even people who are supposedly free thinkers, if you can just get them herded into like a counter narrative of whatever the mainstream is saying, right? And instead of like allowing them to swim in the gaps and cracks and creeks and understand that like the place we live is a really fucking weird place and we're really weird inhabitants of it. Mm-hmm. And that interplay is like is fascinating on levels that are way more complicated than like this group of people good, this group of people bad, right? But they love dividing us into that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I got this word in amongst other words with the time that's running to we're almost at the end of the damn show. Amazing.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about like a lot of the bad stuff that you were the more, I guess it was more a time of more destructive behavior, right? Mm-hmm. Sweetheart, we were both in the same boat. Very like I just told you like where I was at before I started like cardio. Right? So we were both in that same thing, right? It has something to do with how we are as sensory type of people and what we needed as that it was just that consumer thing that we needed to eventually wean ourselves off of when we finally figured out the other thing that was going to break pattern for us, right? Uh-huh. And that's what kind of saved us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like the destructive behavior. Like, I mean, I was, I got into all sorts of weird shit, but, or not good shit, mostly related to meth. Right. But, I don't regret it. I might not make the same choice again. Right. But like, there's, many alternate dimensions to reality. And through that experience, I was exposed to some of them and it let me see things from different angles and different perspectives that are, once you're sort of well and pulled out of them, still verifiable as definitely there. Right. Oh, yeah. And while I'm glad not to experience them in the way that I did then anymore, I'll never forget what I saw, felt, thought, and experienced and how it has informed the things that I know now.
I have seen monsters, I have seen deities, I have seen spirits. I have seen my grandmother shortly after she passed. I've seen a number of things, right?
Yep.
And some of it's a challenge, but at the end of the day, it's so amazing on the other end of it because it's like, wow, man, these people don't know how to have a wizard's experience, a shaman's life. What kind of creature are you, right? And, at the very least, we're here to help, right?
Yeah. So anywho, it was really cool when you reached out because I remembered those conversations, where I was and what I was doing and where my line of thought was. And it's always cool when you get like a poke from the past where like almost what seems so far away. It was almost a different lifetime.
Right. Like I got all sorts of emotions about that kind of thing. Because when you said you listened to my stuff, I was like, oh, wow. Like that hit me like, you're crying out in the wilderness to make sure somebody hears you to do a thing right. And like, here you are. Right. And I'm one of the little voices that matter to you in that. And that matters to me a lot. Thank you so much